Strategy Head of JetSynthesys, who will be moderating this session. I request him to please introduce himself and his panel. May I request all the participants to please be on the seat. Thank you. Girish.
Everything gets sorted out here. Let me just introduce myself. So my name is Girish Menon. I'm Chief Strategy Officer at JetSynthesys, and today we've got a conversation going around technology trends in gaming. While it's it can mean a lot, and it's a pretty wide topic. We will talk about a couple of very interesting things out here. And as we get started, let me also introduce my panelist, a fellow panelist on this conversation. And I've got a very interesting set of people who, are so deep into this space, will, and hopefully give us a lot of insights on what's happening, right? So I've got Samir Pitalwalla, Head of Gaming, APAC and Google Cloud. Samir, it'll be great if you can come up. I've also got Anuj Tandon, CEO Gaming at JetSynthesys. Pawan Awasthi, Head of Consumer Marketing, NVIDIA. Just trying to locate him. And while we wait, I've also got a startup, interesting one, Varun Sharma, co-founder at Metaphy Labs. Why don't we all get settled in? And maybe we'll give 60 seconds for Pawan to make it before we get started off. I thought, we can sort of get started with our conversation. And before we sort of dive into it, I just wanted to make 2 or 3 points, right? And I think, while Rajan and in particular Vishal mentioned, right, the whole boys and girls concept, absolutely relevant. On one hand, when I see this crowd, it makes me feel really old. And on the other hand, it's also very interesting and very exciting to see so many young people, engaged in a space which is not only, very, very interesting from a business and a technology perspective, but also something which myself and a lot of other people, and especially all the panelists, are very, very passionate about also, right? So it's great to see so many young faces, and I think that bodes well for the way the industry should definitely evolve. The second thing that I also, wanted to mention, and, unfortunately that Pawan's not in yet, but, the video that Vishal played. Hey, hi. Good timing, Pawan. Thanks so much. Just give me just to that. So, one of the points that Vishal had shown, that video, right? And I thought it was mind blowing to see the way how technology is sort of breaching frontiers, and how stuff that looked very theoretical, almost like magic a few years back, is now not only a reality, it's on the way to becoming the norm, right? And I think that's again very exciting and very brilliant to see. But what is more interesting to me is if you look back to a lot of the media technologies that have evolved over the last few years or so, gaming has always been in the forefront of how they actually get used, and how breakthroughs tend to happen, and how those technologies evolve, right? Whether it is AR, VR, whether it is animation, visual effects, or even some of the game engines that are used, which are now actually used across the wider media industry. And now with generative AI, as the next forefront, or when we talk about metaverses, right? Gaming has seen metaverses 10, 15 years back, right? So gaming has always been at the forefront of a lot of technology changes that happen, and it's probably been the number one use cases as they sort of develop. So I think that's, that sort of gives a very good context to this particular conversation, right? In terms of how we see gaming, evolve, and what are the kind of technology trends which will actually drive gaming into the next, few years as we move forward. And with that, I thought, let me pose a broader sort of question to each of the panelists and use that opportunity to also introduce each of the panelists and talk about how they think about this, right? And Samir, let me sort of start with you. And when we say technology trends, so to say, right? Google has been always at the forefront, globally, with a lot of of the way the technology itself not only gets evolved but also moves around over time. And one of the hot topics of which is generative AI. Google Bard is one of the foundational engines on which a lot of that growth, along with ChatGPT, that is happening today, right? So maybe a quick sense from you as to what are those 2-3 big things that you see that's emerging and that's going to change the way gaming develops as we move forward. And maybe, like I said, quick introduction also.
Hello.
Guys, I think it'll also be useful, if we could have some silence, while the panel is going on. I'm sure there will be more opportunities to engage both with all the panelists as also, in between breaks. But it'll be good to hear the thoughts of the panelists as we speak. Please.
Thanks for that question, Girish. I think, at least in the last 2 years, there's been quite a few technologies which have caught the imagination of especially people in building interactive worlds. Last 2 years was Web3. And then, as we all know, that conversation has kind of changed. And now the new sort of things that people are looking at, broadly the uses of generative AI. Inside of Google, actually, both of these have been interesting, at least from a pure infrastructure perspective, but also in terms of finding ways that we can lend our distribution to supporting these new kinds of business models or pipelines when it comes to being able to bake them into interactive experiences. The three I'll talk about, to keep it short. The important part in Web3 and blockchain has been, as of yesterday, Play has announced support for NFTs. I think that's super exciting because while on the outside of the world, on the outside, people are not claiming to be building on blockchain, a lot of gaming companies globally have continued to innovate on it. And I found it surprising as well, in spite of the whole FTX collapse and generally various things happening, that people continue to believe, especially developers. It wasn't really as much of the VCs, but developers do believe in the ability for people to own these assets and the economies that these can manifest in addition to the secondary transactions that can happen around these assets. Seems to be exciting enough for large publishers and developers to continue to play around with it. To that, Google's kind of done a whole bunch of stuff. The first one has been the blockchain node validation and engines, which we have launched, which allow the likes of Axie Infinity or Polygon, all of these, Google's now a validator to them. In addition to having all these, the blockchain data sets are actually indexed, all of them by Google, so you can track the whole history of an NFT, right from the time that it has been minted to who owns it, how it's being traded. Quite a sort of astonishing amount of data sets that you can use, especially when it comes to building marketing and acquisition strategies if you're a Web3 company. The second has been generally the boom in generative AI use cases. They primarily focus around, 4 things, but the first 3 are large language models. The second one are stable diffusion. Third is the use of 3D and NERF using NERF to create 3D assets. The fourth generally tends to be what happens with video, which is really a sort of next step or evolution from whatever happens with stable diffusion models. In that, I think at least the one personally for me which has been quite exciting has been, stable diffusion generally gets used in pipelines for gaming when you're trying to develop these games. How do you actually create concept art? But a lot of large publishers and devs we are seeing are using this as a way to also enable light UGC. In the case of LLMs, it's the NVIDIA use case is obviously famous, which happened recently around the use of NPCs. But quite frankly, I think the industry as a whole ends up confusing a lot of good old AI and ML use cases with Gen AI because Gen AI tends to be something which is hot and sexy. It doesn't necessarily always mean that whatever you're doing in AI is equal to Gen AI. But beyond NPCs, I haven't really seen a lot of work happening in that. Generally, there is the idea of being able to train your game in terms of its deep lore. If you're building something like Elden Ring or something as deeply set in lore, I can see how those kind of games can use it. But the use of Gen AI in real-time use cases where you're designing from first principles with some of these newer technologies to enable new forms of gameplay, I haven't seen too much of it because, quite frankly, the tech itself is new. So, at the edge of innovation, some of these use cases haven't come out. In the NPC world, there's quite a lot of that already happening, of people using it to generate barks or using it to generate, I would say, increasing the amount of gameplay time by having these immersive worlds, but not really in terms of actually influencing game design. And lastly, it's nerfs. I see that being really a powerful way for some of these editors, especially both Unity and Unreal, to be able to create environments really quickly. But the meshes are not really very well readable inside of these. So, actually creating interactive objects is still a bit away. But using them to set dress your game seems to be something that we see increasing use cases of. All of these obviously are now available since I represent Google on this panel, instead of technologies like Vertex AI, which fit very well, and you don't really even have to use Google's foundational models. You can tweak and fine tune, including using newer sort of reinforcement learning methods which have come out. So those two, I would say, are exciting. And obviously there's the confluence of both of these, which is the use of Web3 to create provenance for generative AI assets. So these are some of the two broad areas I see continued work in. The last one is cloud streaming. Most people tend to dismiss the idea of streaming being expensive. Google's infamous or famous for shutting down Stadia recently, but we've seen quite a lot of use cases when it comes to streaming at the edge, especially with 5G. Using Unreal-based renderers, we have a cool tech called Immersive Stream. I've seen some really good use cases of being able to take these high-end streaming, things which you wouldn't normally be able to render on device at high fidelity. Regular AR kits, etc., don't tend to have high fidelity assets, but the ability to stream this from the cloud, high quality Unreal Engine based renderers and interactive environments, and using newer technologies like cloud-based anchors for geospatial use cases are quite cool. It allows pretty much every Android device to have high fidelity experiences there. So yeah, that's broadly, I would say, a couple of things we see and what we play around.
Got it. No, it's interesting you mentioned the cloud streaming part. I wasn't originally planning to talk too much about it, but I do want to come back to this a little later, right? But as we move along, Anuj, you've been in the gaming industry and you've been one of the pioneers, of the space, right? From an India perspective, and the reason I mention that is, it's also given you an opportunity to look at this industry from different lenses as a developer, as a studio, as an investor, as an operator, right? So you've seen this evolution, from multiple ways, and tech tends to always be a key trigger to a lot of the changes that happens in this industry. So from that perspective, again, will be good to hear from you as to what do you see as those 2 or 3 important changes that are happening, which will actually, trigger, change in the gaming industry as we move forward in India.
Thanks, Girish, for making me sound very old. Yes, I've been just giving a small introduction, been in the gaming industry, especially mobile gaming industry, for the last 13 years. Started off my first gaming studio in 2010. We were in fact building upon the conversation of the last panel. We were the first made in India game that was showcased by Google at Google I/O in 2015. That was something which we did with using Chromecast technology and mobile gaming. So, and then been an operator, and my last role was with Crafton, where I led their investments and corp dev and deployed $135 million for them in India and interactive entertainment. At Jet, I help Rajan manage the various assets that we have in gaming, which includes esports, gaming studios, our invest and operate arm, and others. So fundamentally, one of the key things that I've seen when mobile gaming, let's be honest, at this point has reached a lot of maturity in terms of user acquisition being a problem when you want to launch a new game. The real opportunity for entrepreneurs is to try and be first in any new platforms that emerge, right? Because if you're first, you have a better chance of success, even if the product is not really polished, right? So if you find a niche for itself. For example, I feel Apple Vision Pro as a technology is the first unfinished product that Apple has launched in its history so far, which I have seen. But I think in a year, 2 years, I think that's a massive new platform that's going to open up. The price points will come down. There will be new innovations that will happen in terms of two-screen gaming, narrative-based game designs that will come up with the advancements of narrative game designs. So I feel that is one of the bigger midterm opportunities which I see Indian entrepreneurs can actually build stuff for the world. So that's one. In terms of Web3, I personally I'm not a big fan of asset ownership as a business model because gaming is the forefront of all technological evolutions. It's the first industry that creates mass consumer use case, whether it is AR, VR, anything. The first mass consumer use case is done by gaming companies. Steam already solved for asset ownership. If you just go a little deeper, if you want to buy a Clash of Clans account, you can buy it at whatever level you want to. There are solutions which are messy, which are already there if you want to figure out in the gaming world. Yes, Web3 for asset ownership makes it easier, but there has not been. So just to rephrase it, it's still early. We've not seen the mass consumer use case in terms of Web3, but I still feel people who have got funding can hang in there. There will be something coming. Be persistent, and of course, AI is this tactical opportunity in AI is to build games like Choices, where asset generation, story generation, all of it is fed by models which are already there. Their pipelines become much simpler because generative AI in the art can solve for that. So that is the tactical. If you want to start building a game to test the Gen AI and start raising funds from VCs, that I'm doing something in Gen AI, then that is the easiest opportunity for an entrepreneur to tackle at this point, which will make sense. There are more complex use cases, which Samir mentioned, but they are still early.
Okay. Thanks so much, Anuj. Pawan, thanks for joining us today. And, I think I was just mentioning at the start of the conversation when, Vishal played that video, and, we've seen also and read about a lot of what, NVIDIA has been doing. And, as we move along, I do want to go a little bit deeper into that, but maybe, just 2 minutes from your perspective, both introducing yourself as well as giving a little bit of perspective of how NVIDIA looks at while your stated mission is not specifically about gaming, but what you are doing, how does it actually influence and create opportunities within gaming?
Sure. So thank you, Girish. Hello, everyone. So yeah, very quickly, I've been associated with NVIDIA for almost 16 years, and I think precisely the time that I have spent with the gaming communities in India. Way back in 2007, my first charter was to create enough gaming cafes in the country so that the gamers like us can go and experience the latest and the best. And I continue to do so even after 16 years, having spent 16 years in the company. But gaming has definitely come a long way. I think when we talk about the new trends in the gaming, Samir has already spoken about, you have also covered that part, which is generative AI. I think that's the buzzword right now. Everybody talks about generative AI. But the Gen AI wasn't really, heard of 6 or 8 months back, right? The whole buzzword got created in the last 6 or 8 months into the mainstream. So gaming is not only about generative AI when we talk about the new trends. I think the AI itself is defining the gaming industry for quite some time, has been defining the gaming industry. In our case, we have been effectively using the artificial intelligence to improve the gaming experience, both for the gamers and the game developers for many years. And one of the key technologies that we have bring forth basically using AI is the deep learning super sampling, or DLSS as we talk about. Now with our latest generation of the products, DLSS is a default function. And what it does basically is that instead of generating 8 frames which are required to create a scene, we just render 1 frame and the AI does rest of the work. So the 7 frames are generated by AI, not by the hardware. Now, because using that particular aspect, we have not been able to increase the performance, but we have also been able to reduce the power consumption, which is a very essential part of the development of the hardware, which gives you some immersive experience. So that has been there in the play for a very long time. With the latest DLSS 3.0, we have added another dimension, wherein actually we not only generate the frames, but we also increase the fidelity, the quality of the frames. So while the frames are getting rendered at probably 1080p resolution, we can actually, using AI, we can increase upscale the entire quality to 4K. So I think the AI has been doing all these background things in the gaming space for quite some time, but Gen AI will trying to increase the experience to take it to a different level altogether. NPC being useful in the real game scenario is one aspect, but as we speak, there are lots of publishers working on in the background. I'm not at liberty to comment on that one, but I think in the next 6 to 8 months, we will see how Gen AI actually is transforming the gaming experience. So that's definitely is one. Sorry.
No, great. Thanks so much, Pawan. Varun, let me come to you, right? With Metaphy, focused on a lot of what some of these other panelists have mentioned about, right? Both on the immersive experiences side as well as Gen AI, applications.
Right.
It'll be good to hear, from you and both in terms of your background, but also more importantly, a little bit of a bottom-up perspective of how startups can see opportunities, leveraging the latest technology, within the gaming and space in India.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Girish, for this question and giving me this opportunity. So, as Samir and Pawan had rightly stated that this what we are seeing right now as a term of Gen AI is actually a combination of AI along with some Gen AI components which are kind of confluenced together to bring about this experience. And I think at Metaphy I've been more than fortunate enough to work with AI, Gen AI, along with the the immersive experience which you're talking about. So I think because when it comes to innovation, right, it's agnostic of either you're the topmost company or the biggest company, or either you're something who's just starting up. And I think especially for us as well, because we were somebody, we are a team who's deeply into innovation and kind of building something which as we like to quote, something new and something innovative. And of course, once if you're providing something which provides value in any space, there are a lot of leaders who are willing to support you onto this. So just to answer your question on that, it's mostly, if we take even for a bottom approach and everything, mostly it all depends on exactly how innovative that particular thing is, what is its infiltration into the market, and the third thing is on either of the spectrum, what kind of value is it providing, either in terms of experience, either in terms of personalization, either in terms of in some cases kind of hyper emotion, and also in certain cases kind of optimization of on something which has already been done, like something which Pawan mentioned, what NVIDIA is also doing. So in all of these cases, just to kind of have a bird's eye view on how Gen AI, gaming, and everything is pairing up together. So I think there is a huge combination of Gen AI along with deep AI, which is being kind of formed together for these particular technologies. Gen AI is being used to kind of build up these assets. Gen AI is being used to build up these conversations. Gen AI is being kind of used to storyboard and mood board for anything that you kind of look forward to and kind of hyper personalized for any certain user. But in similar terms, I think there's a very parallel vertical for this, which includes that people need to be comfortable with actually this hyper emotion. People need to be comfortable with I mean, whatever experience are we providing them. So this is the place where a different aspect of intelligence kind of comes in. And I think something which I would also like to mention for something which we have been doing is pairing up this Gen AI along with the concept of emotional intelligence. Because when we look for an for a longer aspect of what would actually lead to people immerse into this system, that not only includes somebody just just talking to them in a certain manner, it also includes somebody who understands them, right? Because we are going from paradigm of people looking gaming as an escape to kind of people using gaming as an experience, and this experience kind of paired up into a whole ecosystem of conversation of maybe empathize kind of empathizing with how people talk, realizing with how people kind of behave, using these data points to create a safe space for those people to kind of work together, interact together. And this thing kind of aligned well with how these latest technologies have been using to kind of bring hyper realistic renders into the possibilities. I think a few of these things kind of paired together is something which for us how we feel that we would be helping us out from our bottom up approach, and how would we be contributing to this, right?
Thank you so much, Varun. And I think, and each of you have, actually picked on, very, very relevant, topics. And unfortunately, when to say technology trends is such a wide space, right? It's very difficult to do justice in a panel like this. But I think there are two things, which partly being a buzzword and partly also being spaces where there have been a lot of breakthroughs over the last couple of years is what I want to maybe spend a little bit more time on picking your brains. And I think those would be, on one hand, immersive experiences, and on the other hand, Gen AI and what it means going forward, right? More importantly. And I think let me start with the immersive experiences part. And I think for me, at least, when I look at it, it's a bit of an interesting space from a slightly different perspective, right? It's when we talk about immersive experiences, people tend to think AR, VR, mixed reality, and that's it, right? That this is the be all and end all of what immersive experiences mean, right? But to my mind, immersive experiences is the second part is the critical part, which is the experience, right? And even front-facing 2D experience, but which makes you feel part of that environment in terms of the way that you behave and interact is also immersive, right? Or audio is also immersive, right? So I think and gaming again has been has been at the forefront of creating those depth of experiences, right? So so that's one aspect which actually interests me in terms of immersion, right? But the second aspect obviously is critical, right? Because AR, VR, and mixed reality can give you far more immersion than front-facing experiences can give you. but it's also a space which is actually, gone through a lot of yo-yoing in terms of, how the, the potential is, how people have looked at the space, right? We've had, VR, glasses around for a very long time, right? But have, struggled to reach mass penetration for a variety of reasons, and technology being one of it for sure, right? Similarly, AR has also been, been around for a while, and I know Google, also had attempted that in the past with your AR glasses. Again, last few 2-3 years, again we saw a big, reinventing of the whole process with, what Meta has been trying to push through, right?
Right.
And now the expectation is with Apple finally deciding to step in, will potentially make this, into a far more massier experience, though the price doesn't seem to suggest that. But at least from a technology breakthrough and the positioning perspective, it does seem to push things forward in a slightly different way. So I think given that, context, I think I wanted to get your sense on how do you see that progressing? And I'm not really looking for, VR games, AR games, those are the standard pieces, right? But I'm more looking to understand the whole immersive aspect of it. What's holding it back? What do you think are those few things that will change in the next few years, which will make this a much more deeper experience? Or do you think that it's unlikely to become mass and it's always going to be niche, right? So, maybe we'll just go around the panel.
So, if you look at the sort of forcing functions that will happen, one is obviously the hardware install base for something like this. The first sort of early adopters would get access to, you have devices like the PlayStation 5, which have grown during the pandemic, and a lot of them have launched their own VR devices. So I think there'll be a plethora of these, with Meta, PlayStation, and Apple being the three of them which will have a lot of these available. I think the other OEM ecosystem will begin to adopt various kind of operating systems, either by Microsoft or Google for that matter. And some of these may not actually end up having a fully integrated solution, a lot like what Apple does, but may end up just providing software, and other people build and use their app ecosystems to unlock them. So hardware is definitely going to be playing a big role in this. I think 5G, predominantly because of its ability to not be dependent on the client side for rendering these experiences, will be important, so that you can render them closer to the edge. So there again, the combination of high quality networks which are available for these devices to tap into, which are also battery optimized, so that they don't end up, they end up doing most of the workloads in the cloud, as opposed to draining, batteries at the edge when it comes to the, client hardware. And the third one, which syncs well with this, is obviously the ability to do network compute and storage on the cloud. The fourth is, I think, in the initial parts, it will be the app ecosystems will be pretty much kind of maturing from mobile to XR. So it will be pretty much, it's like what Roblox just announced, right? But in the case of Roblox, it is already a VR world, but the UI and UX needs to still adapt to things like the ability to navigate with your eye, which is what differentiates Apple, the ability to navigate with hand gestures. So a lot of the input controls will take a while to adapt, because folks will need to get used to, as a dev ecosystem, or what does it mean to create for mobile and now to create for a whole new form factor. But these ecosystems tend to have evolved really quickly. You can already see what happens when new, say for example, haptic feedback on the PlayStation 5 controller. So things like those tend to evolve fairly quickly, especially, as Anuj said, with games being at the forefront of this kind of evolution and adaptation. So those are the 4 to 5 things I can see. I think all the good parts is that when you have large companies like this make the moves, they tend to make the moves because they already have, just like the Hansel and Gretel story, put breadcrumbs of technology already there. Ever since the iPhone 12, we already have LiDAR scanners available in phones, the ability to take and use these photogrammetry tools to drag assets into these worlds. So a lot of those breadcrumbs are already there. I would say that they are close to about 250 to 300 million devices that are capable of doing this, including now using Nerf, for example, to create 3D assets using wild capture from YouTube. So a lot of these things will have a lot of the breadcrumbs already there. The devices now allow for a consumer grade experience, albeit at the top, but the surrounding scaffolding of 5G and cloud will also allow for lower quality devices which may not have the rendering capabilities, but the ability to access this over the next 2 to 3 years on for even cheaper devices to have experiences like this will become even more ambient. So, yeah.
Fair. Anuj, like I said, the whole immersive experiences, particularly what, device led, has gone through cycles, over the past few years. But do you see, elements sort of coming together or falling in place to sort of help more deeper immersion as we go forward? Or do you still see, it being potentially more niche and, not scalable?
I think in the short term, the answer is niche.
Yeah.
I've been in this industry long to see at least 2 hype cycles of hardware-led disruption in gaming, especially mobile gaming, happening. One was led by Ouya, which was a company that promised TV experience for mobile games, and the second was, not to say the hype cycle still survived a little, is the traditional VR industry, which underwent with the Magic Leaps and the HTC devices coming, OEMs coming out, right? I think with Apple, obviously it changes the game a little. With spatial computing is involved, because they sort of think through this. That's what I would hope. Usually before launching stuff like this, I would say I am cautiously optimistic for the short term, but I'm optimistic for the medium and the long term of new experiences being developed on these devices and immersion. But I would also want to say, if you're a game developer, platforms are interesting because they can be tactical for you to exploit. The long term for a game developer is to build immersive, fun experiences. That is why a Ludo King, which Vikash will probably forgive me for saying, there's not the best looking Ludo game, still beats a Tencent released 3D Ludo game in the market. It's all about understanding your customer at the end of the day and what works for them. So I sort of think bottoms up is the better approach when you're also judging which platform you're targeting.
Got it. Fair enough. Pawan, obviously a lot of what NVIDIA is doing is contributing to the breakthroughs in terms of so while the hardware platforms will be doing their stuff, but it's a lot of what you are doing which will feed into the software and the content that sort of goes into some of these immersive experiences, right? And I come back to what Vishal showed in the morning.
Right.
I think the kind of immersion that's now possible, is phenomenal. So I think again, what do you see, slightly longer term than therefore, right? I mean, not necessarily longer. I think in this industry, 5 years is long enough for us to say, what kind of, with all the immersive work on immersion that is happening, what kind of, major changes will you see over the next 4-5 years in terms of the way the consumption happens?
Sure. So the way I see the immersion or the experience when it comes to the immersive gaming is actually there are 2 parts to that. The first part which I see happening is in the traditional space. So I will call it incremental changes, because all said and done, the classic immersion is still dependent on few basic things: a very good storyline, a great game experience, maybe a large size display, a latest hardware, a combination of everything basically. And then you add some more tools to make it better and bigger, and obviously you enjoy that immersive experience in the traditional sense also. The second thing is, of course, all the new development which has been happening in this particular space, and the new hardware which has got announced brought in lots of excitement again into the VR XR space. So that also is an opportunity, but I think we all need some disruption in that particular area. So as soon as that happens, from our side, our approach is basically to take care of both these different aspects. And for both, we have been developing hardware and tools. So for example, the hardware that we have supports both the sides of the approach. If you want to do anything on XR, VR, our hardware is ready. But then it's not only the hardware. I think, thank you for bringing that particular topic. So it's not only the hardware which does the magic, right? So alongside the hardware, I think we spend, if not the equal amount, then definitely, not the more amount, then definitely the equal amount of efforts to develop the software and the software suites. So if you want to do anything on the VR space, we have VRWorks, the suite of software and the SDKs readily available, free to download from our website. Download it, use our existing hardware, and you can start creating content and start enjoying the content in VR and XR. Similarly, the generative AI may be a hardware opportunity for us, but in order to enable the ecosystem to take care of that particular development, we are doing lots of research and efforts to create the software tools required to make it successful for you. As we speak, I think there are more than 2,000 startups who are trying to leverage the Gen AI development using our tools and the software and the hardware, everything, to create some differentiated content. So it's not only the hardware, I think the software, I think combination of both these approaches probably will, converge, and hopefully we will have some new immersive experience coming our way.
Great. And I think one point that you mentioned, which is about, the frame development that you did, right? You do one, and the remaining gets generated, and that has a big impact on the cost, for this entire process.
Right.
And Varun, and this is addressed to you in that sense. There was another point that was mentioned in the opening remarks about frugal economy, right? And which is what India is good at, which is to deliver high value at a fraction of the cost, right? And I think when it comes to immersive experiences, what are the models and opportunities that you guys see where it is possible to actually
comes under such high fidelity, comes under such high ecosystem where it's truly accessible, and considering India as a master's game, the infiltration is something which is a big entry point for most of the companies which come out, even for brands, right? If a brand is wanting to build an hyper immersive experience, so for them they would have two major issues. Firstly, it won't be able to reach to most of the market, because that would demand some certain specification, that would demand some certain things for the users to have. The second thing is, it for anybody to build a whole experience, it requires a lot of capital, influx, especially in the starting point, because it's like kind of shifting their whole strategy, from considerably having their digital channels as a kind of a brand expansion strategy, to scrapping it and building a whole experience, and kind of expecting their users to adopt and kind of have a complete 180. So in this particular case, I think solving something on the layer 0 itself, where it's not a complete 180 degree of the strategy, but it's an extension of the strategy. So this is one place we have been working for almost 1.5 years, and finally at this point we are able to achieve something which is channel agnostic, achieve something which is highly modular and can be incorporated in could be web, could be your mobile application which is being used, could be, if needed, your like platforms like Windows platforms, Mac platforms, Safari, anything. So yeah, that's that's something which I feel we should work with.
Fair enough. The other point I wanted to
I'm sorry to interrupt. May I have all the startup groups to please be seated? May I have your attention, please? All the startup groups, may I request you to please be seated? We hear a lot of noise. The panel discussion is We are not able to hear, the audience is not able to hear us. May I request you to please join us for the panel discussion. We will give enough time for startups to showcase their games, for sure, because that's the point. We have the agenda in place. May I request all of you to please join for the panel. We have a great audience. May I have a round of applause for the audience, please? Thank you. Thank you. Girish, may continue. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Amadu. Okay, now I can hear myself speak. But thanks so much, guys. So the other point that I, obviously wanted to, talk about was around Gen AI. I know we've already touched upon it through our conversation. So, maybe, we can keep it, with a slight, get a perspective from a slightly different twist, right? That is to say, what kind of opportunities are there for Indian startups, right? And the Indian ecosystem itself, right? To build. This is probably the one, breakthrough or change that is happening where, as the technology has been sort of, put out there in the developed markets, is actually available across the world, right? So everybody is learning at the same time. It's not that a startup in India who wants to do something using Gen AI is in any way disadvantaged from a startup sitting in Silicon Valley, right? It's a level playing field at this point, right? Because everybody is learning, because the technology itself is evolving. And because, again, like we mentioned, at the beginning in the, the opening remarks, 400 million users, right? You get something right for India, you get something that works in India, you can always make it travel the world, right? So given these 3-4 elements that are coming through at this point around generative AI, so what kind of opportunities do you see for startups in India and for organizations in India to build on this and build for the world?
So I think let's divide it into two halves. One is people who are producing these experiences, and the others who are creating tools that enable these experiences. At the base layer of the tools are obviously hardware and software platforms, which is mostly powered by NVIDIA right now. And then you have the folks who take this and then synthesize it and provide it to you with sort of tech like foundational models where you have Google, Microsoft, and others. And then on top of that, there is a whole range of folks who are coming in to build out who build out tools which allow you to create these. So I think the ones which we are seeing right now are folks who are deeply looking at the game production pipeline and saying where are these tools, whether it's in the ability to take something from concept art to rapid prototyping. Like that's a big word, right? Because pre-production and production in games, especially if you're doing AA and AAA games, tends to be really expensive. 70% of a game's product cost in terms of overall cost tends to be in creation of assets. So if you're building anything in that space, I think it's incredibly exciting for people to look at. Now, a lot of these, the ability to create these assets and the fidelity of it changes depending on your target market and your target market of developers. If you're building out of here within APAC, Southeast Asia and the South Asia market tends to be quite focused on casual and hyper casual, although that is changing and people are putting their hands up to create AA and AAA titles for mobile. But, I'm just talking specifically about the way you can build verticalized tool sets for both of these. There, I think the idea of AI tends to be, if you're building something for only devs, it is, you'll probably at most reach 100,000 people in this part of the world and before you start exporting to others. But if you end up building for users where the need to create these assets tends to be in real time, those tend to be, important workloads which anybody would like to integrate with because they're harder to do at scale. So think, for example, the ability to create if you're creating a, convertible card game and your ability to create these assets that are personalized but are also able to, for example, be linked into a dynamic economy where you can actually mint these really quickly and be able to generate these. Those are not really easy problems to solve because you can create dumb assets, but you can create really smart personalized assets that allow you to, eventually it comes down to how are you helping me reduce CAC, grow engagement and increase LTV, right? So that fundamentally is the business problem that every gaming company or any company building experiences is trying to solve. If personalization can lend itself to it, that would be great. So the ability to personalize with both LLMs as well as with stable diffusion models allows you to do things which fundamentally can move these levers. How you can creatively interpret it to create new forms of product or improve existing kinds of product, where if you're a tool company building that space or you're building an end consumer product in that space, both are sort of, to your point, unique circumstances given the mass diffusion of these technologies, especially to both the likes of NVIDIA and the cloud providers, allowing you to access these tools for Titans really quickly.
Sure. I would agree with Samir on all the facts that he said about tools. There's an opportunity to build that. But again, I'll give a game developer perspective. I think from the opportunity, I mentioned games like Choices are the low-hanging fruits. From India specifically, the reason for large monetization of certain kind of products in gaming is a lot of Indians are very social on games, right? With all the text-to-speech innovation that is happening and the NPC advancements that are happening, massive opportunity is if you can build more social experiences without having and make it realistic without having to spend a lot of user acquisition capital. That will lead to a higher ARPU conversion. So that is a very, very specific India and emerging markets, more or less, MENA as well. Because the more real players that you play with, whether it is your BGMI, whether it is your Ludos, the more conversions of paying users happen. And Gen AI specifically will disrupt that sector in that's the short-term opportunity which I see with that was very specific to emerging markets.
Your perspectives?
Well, I think we are yet to figure out the true potential of Gen AI as we speak. It's the latest phenomena, and I think we all are trying our level best to really understand it properly in terms of the opportunity. But I just want to quickly add what Samir and Anuj have already spoken about. I think there's a massive opportunity for the personalization here, leveraging Gen AI. We know that there are so many languages that we have, so many vernacular opportunities are there in front of us, that NPC in the local language, conversational AI, etc. If we bring all those combinations into the picture, I think there itself we see lots of opportunities for Indian developers, for the Indian entrepreneurs. Not only for India, but even for the Southeast Asian audience as well. So I think that is something that I would want to add to what Samir and Anuj have already spoken. But I think we all are trying very hard to really understand the true potential of Gen AI.
Varun?
It's just I'll just quickly start with a small quote from one of my favorite visionaries, Nawal Ravikant. So he said that if Gen AI takes over the world, then people would get to do something which is creative, right? So even in this space, as you mentioned, right? So on the on a bird's eye view, so Gen AI is basically a pool of high intellectuals who are trained on a certain data, who are made to be experts of a certain field, right? The only difference is, what kind of books are you feeding them? So again, as you said, how does it differ in terms of for India or for other markets? The only difference which would be in the factor of creativity and what we are feeding them, what are we, kind of making them learn, and what are we kind of making them kind of pivoted towards. And in terms of, what the future looks like, I think, in a certain level, from level 0 to level 10, through all of these phases, I think there is, one type of either it's a direct involvement of Gen AI, or Gen AI can be seen as something which is more of a co-pilot for something which has been already done. Starting from somebody wants to develop a game, especially for UGCs, right? For users, they want to have their creative minds, but for them to actually get into the phase of development, that becomes very difficult. But Gen AI is, through all of these steps, if you want a mood board for what do you want, Gen AI is there to produce that. If you want a storyline, Gen AI is there to produce that. If you want to kind of, have the, even if, even the music behind it, not just the music, the art behind it, how, it's being made in terms of you dream, kind of the Gen AI will produce that for you. So from ideation to conceptualization to actually delivery, through all of these phases, I feel Gen AI would definitely have a major part to it, and the humans would be left to the creativity. So, I mean, just to sum it up in, how I feel that.
No, fair. I think, like I said, at least for me, with Gen AI, it's because it's a level playing field, because it's still evolving. I think, early days, so to say, but it also, I think, gives me the confidence that this is potentially aspects where, as the Indian industry will have a lot to contribute, both over here and globally. And I think it's great to hear all of your thoughts on it. And I think we're sort of running out of time, and I would sort of like to wind this up. But it's been, I think what this tells me is that on one hand, while gaming has always been at the forefront of use cases, mass use cases when it comes to implementing a lot of technology, I think we are now in that phase where there's so much new technology emerging, happening, evolving. I think this is a phase over the next 5 years where you could potentially see some very dramatic changes that will happen in the way experiences are consumed. And that's I think augurs really well for the gaming industry, because I'm fairly sure a lot of this will be seen first in gaming experiences, right? So I think that's great to hear. And I think before we wind up, I would like to maybe throw it open for any questions that the audience may have to the panelists.
I'll just repeat the question. Anuj, you made a statement saying that I'll be cautiously optimistic in the short term and optimistic in the long term. Okay. The second question is obviously what is the term that you're looking at, right? Duration. But the first question is what is the caution that you're looking at? Is it I don't want to invest too much into product development or invest in this area, or go ahead doing it, but just wait for the market in terms of mass adoption to expect returns out of it? What is exactly the caution that you're looking at?
Right. That is my caution is if I'm an entrepreneur building for this platform, right? As I see as an opportunity, it can be a biased view. It's not from an investor lens, because investors, in my experience of raising capital and deploying capital, do not see, there are not a lot of people who will understand the sector in the depth that a lot of entrepreneurs see the opportunities as, right? So that's the truth. I'm cautiously optimistic because it's the first time I've seen an unfinished product from Apple being released, and it was specific to Apple Vision Pro that was launched, right? So, and the high price point that it put. Short term means next 1 or 2 years. Medium, I'm optimistic post 2 years. Very optimistic that it will be a very transformative platform for content creators and game developers to build new experiences. And I'm optimistic that I will see a lot of new experiences coming there.
Sure. If you don't mind, I just need a couple of minutes to go offline, because we are developing a virtual reality fitness app that's going to be on the Meta store. I just need a little bit of thought.
Absolutely, man. I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi. So my question is to Anuj and Varun Sharma.
So can you introduce yourself at the start, please?
Yeah, sure. My name is Sanjay. Currently, I'm developing a multiplayer game. So my question is to Anuj. You are CEO of gaming for JetSynthesys. What are the problems that you are currently facing in your company, and you're trying to solve it? What are the problems? And the next question is to Varun Sharma as well. What are the problems that you are currently facing in your startup, and Or how are you trying to solve it?
I mean, that will require some beer to talk about the problems that I'm facing as I'm doing my job and explaining. But if I had to get, in the game development ecosystem, especially mobile gaming, right? The biggest challenge right now is it's reached a maturity level. Whenever an industry reaches a maturity level, your existing brands are established, and it's very difficult for a new entrant to sort of break through the clutter, right? So user acquisition problems, cost increase. The 2014 to 2019 era was where you could launch a game and it can be successful, and then you get user acquisition capital and you can still make it. It's incredibly hard now to build a successful mobile game. Having said that, the opportunity is still there in emerging markets, because emerging markets like India, Middle East, Africa, you are still consuming a lot of globally made products, right? They do not have a lot of consumption of locally made content. Now, some would argue because they're not good enough, but that's the opportunity. If you can build local products for local audience in the long term, that's the opportunity which I see. So that's the best I could answer that question.
So, just to answer your question directed towards, what issues mostly, a startup in this space is facing. So the first thing is exactly as, Anuj mentioned, the acceptance. That is something, because especially if you're working in something which is a vision for the next 5 to 10 years, right? It's very hard for you to put some quantitative measure to that, right? So, and not just that, it's also because if you're working on building something which is more innovation driven, right? So at least, at a point where, we see ourselves in a kind of a slow economy. So at that point, putting all your chips just onto the innovation and, something which does not have a quantitative measure, that of course, that becomes an entry point for, as we, like if we go to the market, and exactly as Anuj said, it kind of increases the cost to actually, capture users. So firstly, of course, that is there. But, speaking particularly for Metaphy and something which we are doing, we would still consider ourselves, fortunate enough, because, we are working under the shell of, visionaries like Anuj and, Rajan and the people themselves, which are truly driven towards, value driven and innovation driven approach. But for something which is just kind of starting up, the first thing is, you need considerably, a huge amount of capital to get a vision into the place, right? And in this particular economy, that what it used to be in 2020 and 21, so this paradigm has kind of changed. So the first is entry level to even your MVP is a difficult thing. Secondly, you don't have any quantitative measure to put it out to the market, and people would be so receptive towards what you are particularly building. And I think but as long as what you're building, for who you are building, that this is the value which you're providing. But gradually, if you kind of persevere through it, I think it's just a short time frame of having these challenges. And yeah, just that's about it.
Any more questions before we wind up? Okay, there's one at the back.
Hi, I'm Tanay and I play a lot of games, and I'm a software developer in my free time. So, what are your favorite games? What are you playing these days?
It's the monsoon, so thanks to Pawan, I'm still with my NVIDIA 3090 Founders Edition. So I'm putting it through the motions. I have one high, which is I use it for pushing Cyberpunk, and I still haven't finished it. I take it slow.
Right.
And then and the other one is, I'm still guilty of playing a little bit of CS, unfortunately. And the other one is on the phone is still a bad addiction to Clash Royale. And on the PlayStation, it's Ratchet and Clank.
Yeah. my constant in life has been FIFA. Like I've been playing every edition since it's come out. I play that very aggressively. You don't want to be around me when I'm losing. So that's my gamer rage game. On mobile, I play a lot of Age of Medieval. I like playing strategy games a lot, which is on mobile. That's my personal choice. But sports and strategy is what I do. But in terms of unfinished games, RDR2, Red Dead Redemption 2, is the game that is still dragging along on my PS. Not able to finish.
Well, I am an old Call of Duty fan, so I continue to play that whenever I get chance. Frankly, I don't get enough time, but thankfully the laptop that I use for work is a 4070 laptop. Actually helps me to still achieve that kind of. So yes, Call of Duty for me, and I actually end up playing the same thing on my mobile devices also because of this GeForce Now, the cloud gaming that we have yet to get announced in India. But because of that, I can play my PC games on my mobile devices as well. So Call of Duty all the way for me.
I think the best part about my job is, playing any certain kind of game is more like an R&D for us. Right, which although which Pawan said, because unfortunately he does not get enough time for that, but for us it's a part of our R&D step, and especially if we are building something in an open world space. So I think recently I've been playing a bit of, I think Call of Duty has always been the one of the premium legendary games which it's nobody ever kind of gets over. The second thing is we have also been I have also been playing along with a couple of my colleagues a bit of Fortnite, which is a true representation of all of the concepts which we had discussed today, how AI is being incorporated, how immersiveness is kind of growing through it. So I think to kind of sum it up, the COD and Fortnite would be my current two games.
Girish, you should also
answer. But so I'm not really a hardcore gamer per se. I spend more of my gaming time on casual games, but a lot of chess and a few puzzle and strategy games is what I tend to cycle through. Great. I think
Great.
Yeah, do we have any more or we are done, right? I think
We're
we are
done.
overrun by quite a bit, and I'm getting a lot of dirty looks. So great. Thank you so much, guys, for listening in, and thanks so much to the panelists for all your thoughts today. And I hope this has been a useful conversation for all of you. So great. Thanks so much, and all the best.
Thank you.